good morning, everyone. Um, to the tutorial of big data analysis using multi-layer networks. This will be today's first tutorial in COTS 2021. So we have our tutorial speakers with us, Professor Sharma Chakraborty and Dr. Abhishek Shatra. So Professor Sharma Chakrabarti is an ACM distinguished scientist and distinguished speaker. He is also an IEEE senior member and a Fulbright specialist. He organized and he was the general co-chair of the 13th International Conference on Distributed Event-Based Systems. He has spent several summers at Rome Air Force Research Laboratory, AFRL, as a faculty fellow working in continuous query processing over fault-tolerant networks and video stream analysis. Sharma Chakrabarti is professor of Computer and Engineering Department at the University of Texas at Arlington, and he is also responsible for the establishment of the Information Technology Laboratory at UT Arlington in January 2000 and currently heads it. And she has also established the NSF-funded Distributed and Parallel Computing Cluster (DPCC) at the UTA at University of Texas in Arlington in 2003, and he is the recipient of the University Level Creative Outstanding Researcher Award for 2003 and the Department Level Senior Outstanding Researcher Award in 2002. Abhishek Shatra is a research volunteer at Information Technology Laboratory, University of Texas at Arlington. His research interests include databases, graph mining, big data analytics, and multi-layer networks and machine learning. He received his PhD degree in computer science from the University of Texas at Arlington in 2020, working under the supervision of Dr. Sharma Chakravarti. His dissertation was focused on developing a decoupling based framework for the analysis of complex data sets using multi-layer networks. He has applied his research work towards the modeling, aggregate analysis, and visualization of multi-entity and multi-feature datasets like IMDb, DBLP, Accident, US Airlines, and Facebook datasets. He was the recipient of GTA, STEM, and dissertation fellowship during his doctoral degree. In 2018, he was a part of the collaborative international research project between Umeå University, Sweden, and University of Texas at Arlington, funded by the Swedish Foundation for International Cooperation in Research and Higher Education, STINT. In August 2020, he led a team towards building a web-based demonstration for the analysis and visualization of the spread of COVID-19 across US countries using multi-layer network. Today, their tutorial is on big data analysis using multi-layer networks, and I request Professor Sharma Chakrabarti and Dr. Abhishek Shatra to please take it from here.
Thank you very much, Manjira. So let me start with saying that, good morning to all the participants from India. We are in Texas. It's around past 11 p.m. here. And greetings to everyone who is from different parts of the world. And Happy New Year to everyone. Two of us, myself and Dr. Santra, will be making a presentation on the tutorial today, mostly Abhishek. What I'm going to do is to start off with some background and hand off to Abhishek for continuation. Since a portion of this or part forms his thesis, I think he's better suited to make this presentation than perhaps I am. Given an hour and a half, this is a very short time for what we want to do. So what we are going to do is to kind of give you an inkling or an idea of what we are doing, why this is more recent, why this is better or more useful for certain classes of problems. And we have sort of gone all the way from modeling to visualization. So we'll try to give you a taste for all of that. So let me start sharing. So you can see Abhishek, he will be taking over in a few minutes. Let me share my screen so that I can start the presentation. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Oh, shit. Okay. Can you people see the shared screen?
Yes, Professor Chakravarti, we can say it now.
Okay, so what we are going to do today is how to use a representation, a data model, which we call multi-layer networks for big data analysis. And multi-layer networks are not new, graphs are not new, networks are not new. So what we are going to show is how some class of problems can be done better using this representation than the traditional representations, and we'll say why. Uh, okay, so the roadmap is, I'll give the background for about 15 minutes, and I may pass it on to Abhishek to start with the motivation and the rest of the stuff. So we'll be talking about aggregate analysis like communities and substructures and hubs, centrality. So we'll go through a few of them and show why and how this is different. We also have developed a dashboard using the MLN analysis that we are doing for COVID-19. And the links are here. You're most welcome to play with it after the tutorial and give us feedback. So the basic idea here is to kind of visualize things in a way different from raw data, just showing graphs and other things. We want to show the analysis of how things are changing. So we'll come to that, and Abhishek will go through the demo. So what is the background? So two things I want to sort of start with is saying, what is big data analysis and slash science? Everyone has a slightly different understanding of what it is. I'm going to give you my view and show you what we are doing, which fits our view. So this is going to be sort of my view of big data analytics science. And the basic task or goal in all of the things is transforming disparate data into actionable knowledge and decisions. So this is the key, right? So you have to discover knowledge, then you have to apply that knowledge to do certain things. And this is where, mining, big data analytics, machine learning, AI, all of them come together in some ways. So this is the space of data that we are dealing with. Earlier, we were doing in single type of data, whether it was structured or images or video or audio or unstructured. I think today the trend is to do kind of a holistic analysis, global analysis of putting all of them together. That's also what individual minings is different from this one. So that's one thing. We have large amounts of different types of data. We also have some expectation or analysis objectives that we want to gain out of stuff. So we have a data set. For example, we have COVID-19 data set. We want to know, what kind of policies, what kind of decisions we want to do a week from now based upon what is happening on the ground. So this is what I call transforming disparate data into actionable knowledge. And the way typically it is done is, through an inverted triangle, which connotes we are reducing large amounts of data into something small, something easy to understand, something that is consolidated, that is something that cannot be seen in the raw data by itself. So the way we do it is to sort of think in terms of science, abstractions that we want to come up with for doing this, and applying those abstractions for different ways of doing it. Like, we can use stream processing, we can use machine learning, mining, communities, and hubs. So this is sort of what I mean by big data analysis. Taking different types of data, taking a bunch of analysis objectives, and figuring out that is the hard part, figuring out how to derive or extract knowledge, which can also be visualized, trends and predictions, and most importantly, decision guidance for taking actionable things. So this is the context in which we are going to discuss our work. Before I hand off, so one other thing I want to just give some of the participants who are starting working in databases, data science, where we stand today and where we came from and where we are heading. So this is kind of my view of what has been done. So I feel that without understanding the past, it's somewhat difficult to appreciate the present and plan for the future. I also believe that technology provides solutions. It doesn't mean it solves problems. So a very good example is, we had a panel in BDA a week ago where we discussed that we may have the vaccine, but unless you administer the vaccine, unless you distribute it, unless it goes to the people and get herd immunity, you don't have a solution. So technology is not the same as solution or solving a problem. So that's important to understand. So starting with the 70s, before that, we were only using file systems, relational DBMSs were used. The top line indicates the kind of the user requirements, what was expected, and the bottom shows what kind of signs, what kind of things that were abstractions that were invented or discovered to support these requirements. So 70s, 80s, we went to data warehouse because the analysis from the relational model was not sufficient to do the kind of things we wanted to do, and we had more data. So again, the requirements were somewhat different. We needed vertical integration, multi-dimensional analysis, so on and so forth. So a bunch of stuff came. Then came data mining. Of course, data mining has been around. I'm mainly talking about association rules and the notion of doing mining on actual data, like market basket data, rather than samples, rather than small data sets. So kind of that's where we were. Then came along stream data processing, which was a totally different beast compared to traditional DBMS. And we had sensors, we had very cheap sensors, and the data was coming 24/7, and things had to be done in a slightly different way. So stream data processing came into picture around 2000. Now we are into big data analytics and science. So kind of it's a continuation of what we have doing, kind of all of these flow into what we want to do. Any of these technologies can be used. So I have just put a few things here that we are working on, but there are more things. So handling large data corresponding to 4Vs, if you are familiar with big data, multiple data models, holistic analysis, as I mentioned, deriving actionable knowledge. We are working on a few things. We are working on the multi-layer network modeling and analysis, which is the subject of today's tutorial. We are also working on video situation monitoring using stream data and SQL. We're also using MapReduce paradigm for scaling all kinds of algorithms, substructure algorithms, aggregate algorithms, and so kind of this is kind of a broader picture of where we are headed. So this brings us to the motivation as to what class of problems that we are going to do. So big data analytics is characterized by 4Vs. And there are, you can think of various types of data sets that fall into that category in different ways. V's may be different. So here is just a list of the data sets that people want to analyze, look at which class of big data are we looking at. So kind of we are looking at two classes of problems. One is multi-entity feature and multi-entity, multi-feature relationship data sets. So multiple relations exist amongst. So here are some examples. You can look at the people interacting in so many different modalities. You can think of people interacting via LinkedIn, interacting via Facebook, via Twitter, and so on and so forth. And if you want to do some kind of analysis that says, okay, I want to maximize my marketing or my advertisement among a subset or all of them, how should I go about doing that? So most popular are socially active groups of people across platforms, most influential set of people, all of these boiled onto some kind of aggregate analysis. Same thing, we can do the same thing with airlines, for example, different airlines, high centrality cities, hubs. If you are in this business, if you want to open a new hub, how should you do that? What should you look at? And what kind of analysis will facilitate doing it? So this comes under what we call homogeneous multi-layer networks that we will go into later in more detail. Similarly, there is a second class of problem or data set where we have, again, multi-entity, multi-feature relationships, but the relationships are among different types of data. Here, they were on the same type of data. For example, people were the same. All are associated with people. The same people are in LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Airlines fly to the same cities, for example, whereas here it is slightly different. So here is a good example which is easy to understand. If you look at the IMDb database, we have actors, we have directors, we have movies. So directors direct actors, actors act in movies, movies have genres, movies have ratings, so on and so forth. So here the number of entities are more, and the relationships are also slightly different, not only within the same entity and across entities. So again, you can ask a bunch of different type of questions that you want to ask. And the same thing is true for DBLP entries. For those of you familiar with DBLP, you can ask which group of authors are doing the most publication in this particular conference or this particular themed conference, and so on and so forth. And this we call heterogeneous multi-layer networks, or HMLNs. And so we are interested in analyzing or applying big data analysis for both of these categories. And the way we have done is to take the bottom picture essentially is to take the dataset description, analysis objectives, apply a extended entity relationship approach to derive multi-layer networks, and from that generate analysis expressions, compute those analysis or perform those analysis using an approach we'll talk about, and get final results. And then you can do drill down analysis and you can do visualization. So kind of this is what sort of differentiates to some extent the mining, which is for a specific purpose, whether it's finding association rules, whether it's finding clustering, or whether it's for classification. Kind of this is more general than that one. I think with this one, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Santra to continue with the rest of the tutorial. I'll be around. We both will be happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of the tutorial. Abhishek, you want to share your screen and
Yes,
do
sir.
that, or
I'll do that.
continue? You want to share your screen? Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay, let me start this.
Yeah. So is it visible to all of you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, greetings all of you. Thank you all for attending this tutorial. So going ahead from Dr. Sharma's motivation of what we are solving. So we basically understand they're solving kind of problems which handle multiple entities, multiple features, and so on. So let's look into how the traditional approaches are handling this kind of a problem. Just a minute. Yeah, so, okay. So traditionally, what we are basically using for the search problems are graphs, where each entity is denoted by nodes and the connections between them are through edges. They just can be weighted, they can have directions and so on. So this is a well-defined field. A lot of research is going on in this graph-based field, and there are algorithms for finding communities, hubs, interesting subgraphs, frequent subgraphs, motifs, and so on. The other model is the attributed graph, where the different types of entities are denoted through colored or labeled nodes, plus they are connected through, again, edges, which may be colored or having or may have multiple labels. In this case, a lot of work has been done with respect to finding out interesting or frequent subgraphs. But both these models have a few limitations with respect to these four categories that I will just talk about. With respect to the modeling clarity, on one hand, where the single graph only supports single type of entities, the attributed graph still supports the multiple nodes and edge labels. From the analysis flexibility point of view, single graph approach has a lot of work in communities, hubs, and so on. But with respect to the attributed graph, the work is mostly focused on finding out the interesting subgraphs. From the computational efficiency point of view, the single graph, we have to generate graphs for different combinations, and the combinations may not be straightforward. With respect to the labeled graph, we may have to go forward with multiple traversals in order to fetch the required graph first and then do the analysis. Thus, the computation efficiency is not that great. With respect to the drill down and visualization aspect, both these approaches are not that suitable due to the presence of single types of nodes or due to the convoluted representation and so on. So all these four limitations have been taken care of with respect to the novel multi-layer network approach. And through the decoupling approach that we have proposed, all these different categories uh, are doing well. So there are a few related work which people can go through and understand the current work that has been going on. So going ahead, we'll try to understand how multi-layer networks are being used for the modeling. So as Dr. Sharma said, that there are basically two kinds of problems. The first problem is that we are trying to analyze, suppose the same set of people. So in this case, the model that we are using is known as the homogeneous multi-layer network. So what basically we are doing over here is that the different layers or the graphs have the same set of nodes, but they can be connected based on the feature. For example, the people may be connected based on the Facebook friendships they're having, or the LinkedIn connections they're having, or the call networks and email connections. So the same set of nodes can be connected differently. For the second problem, where we have multiple types of entities, we may go forward with some other kind of MLN known as the heterogeneous network, where each graph or layer has different sets of nodes. Not only that, because of different types of nodes, we have to connect them through interlayer edges. As we can see here, the actor sets can be connected through the notion of whether they have acted together or not. The directors can be connected based on the similar genre they're directing. And the interlayer semantics will correspond to who directs whom. But this may not be the end. There might be another problem statement where we want to find out, suppose, for the co-actor groups, who are the friends on Facebook, which are the director groups with which they have the maximum interaction. So in this case, we can clearly see that for the actor entity, we have to analyze two aspects, the co-acting and the friendship, apart from analyzing the director nodes. So in this case, a few graphs may have the same set of nodes. For example, the friendship network for actors and the coacting friendship for coacting network for actors. Also, there will be another network for directors. So this is a combination of both homogeneous and heterogeneous, and this is being defined as the hybrid MLN. So in a nutshell, basically MLNs are layers of networks where each layer corresponds to a single graph, followed by, in case of the heterogeneous aspect, there might be explicit interlayer edges between the layers. Now, this kind of a model increases the clarity because the layers or graphs are present separately. We can use the existing single graph approaches. The layers can be processed in parallel, and we can elegantly handle the updates of the data set. So once we are done with the modeling, the next comes up, okay, how suppose can we go ahead and see to analyze them? So multi-layer networks have been there since, I think, from the early 2000s, and people are doing some analysis approaches on them. So let's see what are the few limitations of those approaches. The first approach is that we pick up the required layers from the MLN and collapse them into a single type independent kind of a network and then perform the analysis. The problem with this approach is that because of this collapsing, we lose out on the information, the semantics of the individual layers. Followed by, if the MLN has n layers, we may have to go forward with 2 to the power n layer combinations. This might make it difficult to parallelize and scale as well. The second analysis approach is where we are using the MLN as a whole network. In this case, multiple random walks take place across the layers in order to figure out the panel analysis. In this case, we may have to develop new algorithms for each type of analysis. And because of this repeated across layer traversals, it may be difficult to parallelize and scale. This can be seen in this set of related works that I have listed over here. So this brings us to the proposed decoupling approach. The decoupling approach that we are talking about is basically a divide and conquer approach, where suppose over here we're given a multi-layer network with some layers. The first step is to apply an analysis function psi and find out the layer-wise partial results for each layer. And this partial results can correspond to the communities, hubs, interesting subgraphs, and so on. The next process is the composition step. In this step, we only use the partial results to figure out the combined result for layer 1 and 2 using the function theta. So once we get this intermediate result, we go forward in iterative fashion and apply the theta again to get to the final composed result. So over here, the major challenge is to identify the composition functions for the various types of analysis like communities, centralities, substructures, motifs, querying, and so on. Secondly, we need to establish the correctness of this decoupling based approach with respect to the single graph approach, which is the collapsing the network and finding the interesting results what we have. We need to establish the properties. Are they commutative in nature and so on. Lastly, and the most important one is that this composition algorithms need to be efficient in nature. So a lot of benefits are there for such kind of decoupling approach. The first and foremost being it retains the MLN modeling, which brings about a clarity in the semantics and the structure of the results as well. Secondly, because of the divide and conquer type of approach that we are using over here, we can leverage the single graph algorithms like InfoMap for communities, Subdue for interesting substructures, and so on. The results preserve the structure. So there is no loss of information with respect to semantics. There's no distortion of properties. Then comes efficiency. Instead of combining 2 to the power n new graphs and then analyzing them, this approach reduces the analysis to just analyzing the n layers only once. Then comes flexibility. We can arbitrarily combine any set of layers or features and analyze them. Second, for a given expression of some layers, we can go ahead and rearrange those layers to figure out a more optimized variant of the specification to enhance the efficiency. without compromising the accuracy. Because of the divide and conquer approach, there is a lot of opportunity for parallelization. Then comes the ease of updates. So what we mean over here is, depending on the updates to a particular data set, only that corresponding partial result needs to be updated instead of updating the entire MLN altogether, thus saving a lot of computation time in the incremental approach for some analysis. Secondly, this kind of decoupling approach is completely application independent. So this is a set of work we have published, we are writing right now. There are a few under review. So as you know, due to time constraint, we will not be able to go into the details. So you all are free to contact us or go to these papers for better in-depth understanding. So I will start off with communities. What are communities basically? So community right now or in general are basically groups of nodes that are densely interconnected. From the real life perspective, we can think about community of co-actors or community of Facebook friends and so on. Now these communities can be disjoint in nature or overlapping. So what we have an example over here. The green ovals or the yellow or the red ovals correspond to one community, which represents the dense or the more coherent structure in the entire graph. Going forward, there are a lot of different approaches to find out communities. Most popular being the hierarchical type of clustering, where the nodes are grouped based on a similarity measure and a threshold. Two most famous approaches are the Leuven and the InfoMap. On one hand, where Leuven tries to group nodes based on maximizing the intra-community density and minimizing the inter-community density. Whereas in case of InfoMap, it works on the notion of that, suppose the communities are well defined, then the random walker will have a higher probability of remaining in a community as compared to jumping between two communities. Now, there are other different approaches based on minimum cut, betweenness, clique based, and so on. So first, we will go forward and look into what is the type of composition, the Boolean composition that we have defined. Suppose the question is that who are the most socially active group of people across all social networking platforms? So given these two, Facebook graph and a LinkedIn graph, the approach will be, first of all, find out the combined AND graph, which basically represents there will be an edge between two nodes if two people are both friends and connections on LinkedIn and Facebook. Then we go forward, find communities, which will be the final result. So in this case, this result will act as the ground truth for our decoupling approach. Now the aim over here is that given the communities in the layers, in the individual layers, we somehow have to compose them iteratively to find out the final result. So for this, we have given two approaches. The first approach is that, okay, just go forward with the node-based intersection of the communities. Now over here, the problem is that because we did not take into account the topology, there might be some issues. So the next improved version is there where we have gone ahead and intersected the communities based on the topology, like the edge-based intersection. So I will go ahead and give you a small illustration of the process. So each layer, the first step based on the communities, we find out the communities for the Facebook layer and the LinkedIn layer. Then we intersect the communities based on the edges. So if we can see, we get the intersection and we get the final results on the bottommost section of the slide. So interesting over here is that the last two communities, if we intersect this 6-node community from these two layers, what we obtain is probably two disjoint communities. Now, if we had gone ahead with the CV and approach, which was intersecting based on the nodes only, it will represent all the nodes into a single community, which is not correct. That's why there is an importance of taking the topology into consideration. Next comes up the cost analysis. Okay, we can propose an accurate algorithm, but it needs to be efficient. So let's kind of compare the component-based cost that we have. So for decoupling cost, it's made up of the one-time cost, which basically is finding out the communities in the each individual layer. Now this can be done in parallel, so the time will be bounded by the densest layer. The second component is based on the combining the partial results. And for either of the approaches, it just needs one scan of either the community nodes or the community edges. Now, because of this thing, what we have established is that in the worst case, the maximum time it takes to combine the partial results is way less as compared to the one-time cost. Now, this constraint needs to be satisfied probably for any composition algorithm which the community comes up with respect to the efficiency aspect. For any analysis, it can be motifs, substructures, graph queries, anything. Now, if we compare it with the single graph approach, it again has two components. The first component is that given an expression, we first have to generate that AND layer and then apply those expensive community algorithms to find out the communities. And this has to be done for each different expression. So what we have established over here is that the cost of the decoupling approaches is less as compared to the single graph approach that we have. Now, one more interesting thing to be seen over here is that when the analysis pace increases exponentially, this cost of generating the AND layer will shoot up. So the single graph approach cost will also shoot up for each different combination. However, the one-time cost will remain fixed in case of decoupling approach. And because of this constraint that the partial cost combination is less than the one-time cost, the decoupling cost over the analysis space will be even enhanced. Now, going ahead, I'll give you a very short overview of the other type of composition, which is the OR composition. Now, over here, basically what we're trying to solve is, suppose the question is groups of people which are connected in at least one medium, where the OR aspect comes into play. So again, the same approach, we will generate the single graph, find the communities. This is the ground truth. The decoupling approach is what we have gone with. The intuition is that if we have the AND based communities as the seed nodes, can we combine them in some manner to see which AND communities can be combined, which have maximum affinity between them. So for example, in this case, the AND communities will become meta nodes in a meta graph that we see here, which are connected based on the union of intra-community edges, and they are weighted based on what fraction of nodes are connected between these meta nodes. Now, this will be a very small graph. On this small graph, when we apply communities, we get some communities for meta nodes. When we expand them, we kind of get the OR-based communities. So again, we have done a similar cost-based analysis for this approach. We have established the efficiency of the approach, and we have given empirical proofs that yes, that the OR-based decoupling approach also is efficient as compared to the single graph approach. Now I will go ahead and show you a few performance results for this. So for comparing communities, the metric that is used in the literature is known as the normalized mutual information, which basically compares two sets of communities. One is the single graph communities and one is our decoupling approach. The NMI compares only the participating entity nodes, whereas the modified NMI also takes into account the node network topology. So in the second case, the misclassification of a more central node will have a higher impact as compared to a misclassification of a node which is on the fringe. So we have used a lot of real world data sets like IMDb, DBLP, accidents taking place in UK, and have also used synthetic scale-free network generated through RMATs. So the first one is for the AND composition. So what we see here clearly is that we have established that yes, the decoupling approach does give us accurate results of more than 90%. Not only that, in case of efficiency, it gives us a saving of as much as 80% in the cost. The similar results are also we have seen for other accident data sets that we have used. The other interesting thing to be seen over here is that the topology, when we took into account for the CE and approach decoupling approach, did improve the accuracy. As we can see, there was an improvement of 70% in the first case, or maybe 20% in the second case. But in doing so, there is a trade-off with the efficiency. So when we take into account more information from the layer-based aspects, there will be an effect on the efficiency thing as well. So the similar results I observed for other data sets that we have like DBLP, synthetic graphs like RMAT, and so on. So what we can take away from this is that if the individual layers have more well-formed communities, the layers communities are more towards a clique-based kind of a structure, then we can use what we have the CV-AND approach for efficiency. But in general, CE-AND approach will work with respect to both efficiency and accuracy as well. Now, the one important thing that we had talked about earlier was the moment the analysis space increases, this single graph cost will shoot up. But in case of the decoupling approaches, the cost will not increase as much as that in the single graph approach. The major reason is what we have over here, that even in the worst case analysis aspect over here is that the maximum cost of combining the partial results is extremely less as compared to the one-time cost. As we can see here is 90% in the CV-AND case, is approximately 50% in case of the CE-AND case. So this satisfaction, like this satisfaction of the constraint kind of enhances the performance of the decoupling based approach over the single graph approach. Similar results are seen for the OR-based results also for IMDb, the RMAT synthetic graph, accidents. We see the similar component savings as we seen for the AND approach, and the efficiency will basically improve with more analysis. Now this brings us to how do we evaluate a general Boolean expression. Now in this case, what we do is we will again analyze the layers individually, get the individual communities, then probably use the CE-AND approach proposed for the first two, like L1 and lot of L2. In parallel, we can also do the other part of the expression like CE-OR for L3 and L4. Iteratively, we will take ahead this process until we scan the entire expression and get the final results. So this is how probably we can easily go ahead and process any general Boolean expression. Second comes the optimization. Now, suppose the question is that which are the collaboration groups that have published in both the highly ranked conferences, but have never published in any of the medium ranked conferences. So in this case, we picked high-end conferences like BLDB and Sigmod and medium ranked conferences like DASFA and DAWOC, and we connected the authors based on if they have published a paper in that conference. Now, one expression for such can be VLDB and Sigmod and probably not of DASFA or DAWOC. Now, using the De Morgan's and distribution laws, we can rewrite this expression and probably go for another expression that we have of this format. Now, if we just do a basic cost analysis of this, what we can see is in the first expression, there are just two AND expressions. In the second, we have three AND expressions. Secondly, we can easily see that the DASFA and the DAWOC layers are very sparse in nature, which means the knot of this layer will be a dense layer. So in this case, the first one has only one dense layer, but in case of the second one, there are two dense layers in DASFA and DAWOC. So what we can clearly see here is probably if we choose the first expression due to the less number of AND expressions and less number of dense layers, probably that will be a more preferable choice. This also is established with experiments that we did that yes, both give the same accuracy of more than 90% each. However, the first expression gave a saving of as much as 54%, and the second expression gives a 7% saving only. So this basically shows that the decoupling approach can be used to go ahead with more optimized variants of specifications by doing a basic cost analysis, by taking care that we have to reduce the number of compositions, start with AND compositions, and reduce the NOT compositions. Now we will show a few case studies for these. So we have used an IMDb data set where we have actors who in one layer are connected based on if they have acted together or not. In the second layer, they're connected if they are acting in similar genres. In the third layer, they're connected if they have the similar average rating over the movies they have done. DBLP dataset, as I just talked about, based on the co-authorship in different conferences. The other work that we have done is on based on the Facebook dataset, where we are connecting people based on different attributes like age, gender, political views, privacy concern, and so on. So suppose one of our questions is which are the highly rated actors who work in similar genres but have never worked in any movie? Can this kind of an analysis question bring about the potential actor collaborations? So what we saw over here is we got some interesting results, like people like Johnny Depp and Tom Cruise. Most of their movies are oriented towards adventure and action based on the MI series and the Pirates of the Caribbean series and so on. And they're also highly rated. But these two people have never worked together. Similarly, for other genre combinations, we found out a few interesting results based on drama, action, crime, and so on. Now, we can do any kind of analysis and get any kind of random results, but it's very important to kind of verify these results always. So we used some independent sources and saw, interestingly, in 2017, there were talks of casting Johnny Depp and Tom Cruise in pivotal roles for Universal Studios Cinematic Universe, but this never saw the light of the day. This basically means that the work that we are doing based on different decoupling approaches can have a real life implication as well. Then going ahead with the collaboration kind of a picture, people over here will be probably aware of DBLP. So what if we want to find out who are the most widely accepted co-author groups that we have? Can we somehow correlate that with the fact that, okay, which are the collaboration groups who have published in higher conferences but have never published in any medium rank conferences? So based on this, we did our decoupling based approach and we got a few interesting results. Again, using independent sources, what we found out is, yes, the results that we have found, like the first community, people like Dr. Chaudhary have actually won 10-year VLDB awards, best paper awards, along with other people who are combined in that widely accepted collaboration group. Another group is the basically the keynote speaker of this conference on the first day itself. Dr. Agarwal is one of those people in another high impact collaboration groups having more than 24,000 citations. Then people like Peter Bonds have published highly cited papers. So this basically means that the collaboration groups that we're getting through this results does mean that we can actually get groups that are having a higher impact in the research world. Similar work we have done for the Facebook, where we have done kind of finding out how does the personality trait evolve with age. Now, this is a very well-known personality trait. This is not our thing. This is a big five trait which is used by the psychologists all over the world, based on consciousness, openness, extroversion, neurotic behavior. So what they say is any human can be classified using these five traits based on different levels of what they have. So what we basically see is, suppose we have openness. It basically reflects one's preference for new experiences. How open are they for new experiences, or how bound are they to the old traditions or customs? So this basically, if we look into this blue line, this corresponds to the openness factor. So this increases this with age and kind of peaks around the age group of mid 30s. But in case of the older people, this openness to new things dips. And this can be attributed to the fact is probably they are resistant to try new experiences and so on. Now, again, these are based on the data that we have. Probably different eras or different periods have different analysis and different results. So similar analysis that we saw is for other traits as well, like consciousness, extraversion, agreeableness, neurotic behavior, and so on. The other work that we did was, okay, how does the individual's age correlate with their comfort of sharing personal information on social media? Is the younger group sharing more personal information, or is it the older group? Now, what we saw is that people which is who are less than 40-year-old are having a higher privacy concern, as we can see in the graph over here. Till 40, the blue bar is higher. Probably they are aware of the cons of sharing sensitive information. However, with age, this sharing of more personal information on the net increases. This maybe the reason is probably this age group is not much aware of the cons of cyberbullying or other kind of adverse effects which might be there in case we are sharing more personal information on the social network. This brings us to the other problem we have for the heterogeneous multi-layer network. Now, as we go ahead, the heterogeneous network was basically that where we're trying to analyze different types of entities. Now, currently, there is no structure preserving definition. What we basically mean is current approaches, what they do is, now this is a heterogeneous multi-layer network. They first of all convert this into a type independent single graph when they remove all the type information from the individual layers, the interlayers and everything. Then they apply the community detection algorithm and find out the communities. The problem with this kind of communities is there's a loss of structure and semantics. The information is lost, the type information is lost. So there's a lot of distortion in properties in this, and this kind of communities will not reflect the actual picture of the dataset that we have in hand. So this brings out the probably a few desirable properties that we must preserve. First and foremost being we need to preserve the intra-layer community structure, including the types. Secondly, we need to preserve the interlayer edges. More so, this combined communities that we are getting should have what is defined as a high modularity. This defines that the communities should be of a higher quality. Then it should be amenable to the decoupling approach. The detection should be computationally efficient. Plus, the communities that we get should support drill down analysis for more in-depth study. So this brings out to what we have defined as the binary operator. So how do we define a community for two layers? So we start off with our traditional decoupling approach that we have proposed earlier. So given a multi-layer network, first we apply the community layer wise. So here we find out communities for each layer separately. Then we go on to the composition step where we build what we are calling as the community bipartite graph, where each community becomes a meta node and they are linked based on the meta edges that are present between the two layers. Now the motivation over here is to match the communities such that the overall interlayer connectivity or coupling is enhanced. So once we get such a coupling, we can expand these meta communities that we have and we get the final results. So clearly we can see that the structure, semantics, label information, everything is preserved in this case. Going ahead, we generalize this and define the K community for K HTML layers. So for a given order of K layers, the result is basically a set where each element looks like this as or what I have in the bottom of the slide. This basically represents one community from each of the K layers. This ensures the strong connectivity within the layer. But how do we obtain these one communities? Now this one community should be obtained through progressive strong coupling using the operator that we defined on the top part of the slide. This will ensure the strong connectivity across the layers. So in general, basically we have a community bipartite graph where the node sets correspond to the meta community nodes, which are linked based on the weighted meta edges. The two community needs to find out the meta community nodes pairs such that they're able to maximize the overall modularity and the interlayer edge weights. And this definition is applied recursively to find out the community for K layers. Now, the important question over here is, how do we maximize the interlayer edge weights to find out those node pairs? This brings up to the composition aspect. Now, most of us in the audience will be aware of what is known as the bipartite matching. So traditionally, bipartite matching is well defined. Let's see how it compares to our requirements in case of the HTML case. In case of the traditional matching, the nodes are simple nodes in case of hiring, dating, where we basically have males, females, job applicants, and so on. But in case of the HTML, the nodes correspond to communities. Now, both require weighted edges. In case of the HTML, these weighted edges may reflect the characteristics of the participating communities. The most important difference is that in case of the traditional approach, the matches are unique. That means that one node from the left hand side can match to at most one node only on the right hand side. However, in case of the HCMLN, non-uniqueness may play a major role because this may lead to increasing the total overall edge weight for the same number of pairings. Moreover, in case of ties, probably just choosing one of the edges randomly, we may need to choose all the ties for the result set. So keeping these requirements in mind, what we have proposed is a family of composition functions. So let's look into probably this is, we can take as a small toy example where we have meta nodes, weighted edges. So traditional matching algorithm will give us the result as AY and BZ with the total weight as 20 and the number of matches being 2. Now suppose we relax the uniqueness factor, and the first approach we use is to probably include ties as well. So for each match, we will also try to include the ties. So for AY, the tied match will be AX, but for BZ, we only have one of them. So we clearly see if we include ties, we probably can increase the overall edge weight. The other approach of relaxing the uniqueness factor is when we want to somehow find out if there exists a higher weight alternative edge or not. So in this case, what we do is for each matched result that we had here, just a minute. Yeah, so for each matched result that we had here, suppose AY, does there exist a higher weight alternative or not? So for example, in case of AY, yes, there is an AZ with a weight 16, which is of a higher weight. So let's replace the AY with that, with the other edge BZ, the alternative has already been included. So instead of replacing that, we maintain that. So what we observe over here is that for the same number of matches, which is 2, because of relaxing the uniqueness factor, we are able to increase the overall edge weight. Now, other traditional approach is known as the maximum weight perfect match, where the emphasis is given on maximizing the coverage, which is maximizing the number of matches. So here we have 3 matches in this case. This is another traditional approach which is there in the literature. So what we basically see over here is that yes, if we are able to relax the uniqueness factor, both the relaxed versions MWRM and MWMT will be able to increase the overall weight. Plus, in case of the number of pairs, MWM, the traditional approach, and the relaxed version MWRM will give us the least number of matches. So over here, I will give you a short overview of the algorithm. Basically, we have a specification of this format. What we start off is we first of all initialize the community for the first 2 layers. In this case, GN1 and GN2. We go ahead and find out the matchings and get the initial set of results. Then we go ahead and explore the expression from left to right, and we build the community bipartite graph for the next 2 layers, in this case GN2 and GN3. Point to be noted over here is that instead of using all the nodes in GN2, we have only used those nodes that were a part of the result set. So we are not using M and O because they have not been matched with the continuing result set. So we again go ahead, we do the matching. Then we, using the matching results, we will have to update the results that we have in hand. So AN gets extended to ANR, BP gets extended to BPT, and CQ, because of no match existing, will be extended with an empty set. This thing continues until unless the entire expression is evaluated. The question over here is, how do we use these matched results in every iteration to update this continuing result set? Now, this brings us to 2 broad cases. Now, if in a particular iteration, we have one as a processed layer and another is a new layer, then for each tuple, if there exists a consistent match, then we just extend that with the paired community. If there is no match, we extend that with a null set or an empty set. The interesting part is here, if both the layers are processed. Now, what do we mean by this is, suppose this is the expression where GN1 is followed by GN2, followed by GN3, and then again GN1. So if you see the third iteration, both GN3 and GN1 have already been processed in the expression. So in this case, this is what we call is kind of a cyclic expression. So the sub cases in this case will be, suppose in a particular tuple, the community node from GN3 gets consistently matched to a community node which is already present in the tuple. In this case, we just update the tuple with the interlayer edge set. In the second case, probably the community from GN3 doesn't match to any of the communities from GN1. We just update it with an empty set. The interesting thing is, what if the community from GN3 gets matched to a community in GN1, which is not present in the continuing tuple? This is known as the inconsistent match. In order to handle this inconsistency, we update this tuple with again an empty set. So this is how we have proposed the family of these four composition functions based on the matching. But in case of the community bipartite graph, we also needed some weighted edges. So how do we give the weights to the edges? We again go back to the analysis requirement and we see what is the requirement in the analysis. So one of the requirements probably can be to maximize the number of interactions between the participating communities. So in this case, we have used the number of intercommunity edges. Now, if the requirement talks about, okay, take into account the communities which have a strong intra-community relationship. So in this case, we are talking about taking into account the density of the communities. Also, what fraction of nodes from these communities are interacting in the relationship. Another requirement can be, what if we want to find out if the influential nodes in the communities are interacting enough or not. So in this case, the weight metric will take into account what ratio of hubs from the participating communities are there in the interaction. So based on the requirement, we have defined three different weight metrics for the community bipartite graph. Now this brings us to see, okay, what is the quality of communities that we are obtaining as part of the proposed approach. So we compare it with the type independent approach. So in order to find out community quality, the matrix known as modularity, and if the value of that is more than 0.5, we can somehow say that the communities obtained have a good structure. So across all the matching algorithms, we see that we have obtained more than 0.5 as the result, showing that the communities obtained by the decoupling approach have a good community structure. However, we can easily see that because in the type independent approach, because the types of the nodes got mixed up, it generates smaller, denser communities. And that is the reason for the higher modularity values over here. But we should remember that the quality with respect to semantics is not that great in case of the type independent approach. The other interesting observation over here is that across these different matching algorithms, the values differ. The major reason is that when we use a different algorithm for matching, the pairings change, and depending on that, the modularity values also change. Going ahead, we see, okay, what is the effect of matching algorithm on the number of matches and the overall weight? So experimentally and through analysis, we have able to show that yes, the relaxed version do indeed improve the overall sum of weights, and the total number of pairs are least in case of the MWM and MWRM. So over here, what we are basically given as a family of composition functions with respect to 4 matching algorithms and 3 kind of weights. These are commutative, but not associative, as it depends on the order of expression that we have to evaluate. Plus, what you understand over here is that the analysis space is huge. Now, if we kind of take the entire HEMLN as a single graph where each layer is a single node and we connect them through edges, the number of analysis expressions is a function of connected subgraphs, possible orderings, the number of matrix that we have, bipartite matching, and so on. So we can easily see that the analysis space is huge in this case. So again, as we have seen for the earlier decoupling approaches, the cost has 2 components. One-time cost, same as the earlier approaches, find communities in the layer-wise fashion, bounded by the densest layer. The intermediate results based is made up of 3 components. First is what is the time for the weight computation. Second, the time for generating the community bipartite graph, and third, the time it takes to find out the actual matchings. Now we should take into account is that the number of meta edges and the number of meta nodes in the community bipartite graph is way less as compared to the actual number of nodes present in the HEMLN. So this basically shows that the cost of combining the intermediate results is much less as compared to the one-time cost. Now I'll go ahead and show a few analysis results. So over here, what we have used is the IM2 data set, where we have a layer for actors who are linked based on if they work in similar genres. Directors are linked based on if they have worked in similar genres, and movies are linked if they have been rated in a similar fashion. And there are links between the layers based on who directs whom and who acts in which movie and so on. Similarly, for a DBLP, we have an author layer, we have a paper layer and years layer, and they're connected based on co-authorship, similar conferences, similar ranges, and so on. So we have done a lot of different analysis. Over here, we will be presenting a few of them only. So yes, the incremental cost, as we see here, is extremely less, showing the applicability or the efficacy of the decoupling approach. Now, suppose we want to find out the potential actor-director collaborations. Can the decoupling approach help? Yes, it is efficient that we have already seen as part of the previous result, but can it give us some interesting insight into the results that we have? So the question that we're asking is, okay, for the most popular actor groups, uh, which are the movies they're acting in? So basically, we have to connect the movie layer to the actor group, then find the director groups with the maximum interaction, and also who also make the movies in the similar ratings. So basically we are linking the movie layer to the actor layer to the director layer and then director layer to the movie layer. So as we saw algorithm, what we see over here is kind of the cyclic structure where the movie layer is followed by the actor layer, followed by the director layer. And if we drill down, we can look into the actual names over here and we get a community of this format where we have an actor community, a director community, and a movie community. Now, through this, can we drill down further and uh, find out potential actor-director collaborations based on similar expertise and based on the similar kind of highlighted movies they are doing? Now, this can basically be done by finding out what are a few incomplete clique-like structures. Can we find out few incomplete triangles here? So what we see over here is people like Hilary Swank and Leonardo DiCaprio have worked together. In return, DiCaprio and Sam Mendes have worked together in a movie like Revolutionary Road, but Hilary Swank and Sam Mendes have never worked together. So based on similar expertise, similar high-rank movies they have done, and similar kind of genres they are doing, probably a possible future collaboration can be a movie starring DiCaprio and Swank with Mendes at the helm. Going ahead, we can also use a similar kind of approach for a DBLP. Now, conference-wise, can we find out which are the most cohesive or the collaborative actor groups or author groups who publish frequently? Now, this kind of analysis can tell us, okay, probably who can be the next keynote speaker, or probably who is the most impactful author group in a particular conference type or research domain. So what we see over here is that conferences like ICDM and DAWOC have multiple author communities that are equally important. Now, we use a few independent sources to find out the quality of these things. Now, what we see is for SIGMOD, the group has people like Dr. Tim Kraska, who have actually been recipients of the Best of SIGMOD awards. For VLDB, we have Dr. Rajiv Rastogi, who has published VLDB papers which have received more than 900 citations in the past 18 years. Going ahead for ICDM, we have people like George Karaipis, who have done a lot of work in substructure discovery and have won ICDM 10-year awards as well. So what we are basically seeing as a part of our approach, it can be used for real life significance results as well, and actually get people or community groups that are actually really impactful in the real life scenario. Similar approach we have used to find out probably the most active periods for different impactful author groups. We have also found out probably which are the actor and director groups who are doing work in the similar genre. So we found out people like in with respect to action, drama, comedy, romance, and so on. So now I will give you a very short overview of. We have also done work in the hub detection factor. So hubs are basically what means is that the influential nodes. So which are the most popular people or the most influential people on Twitter, Facebook, or which are the airport hubs, which is the most popular co-actor. So such kind of work we have done for MLNs as well with respect to degree centrality, which basically finds out the nodes which have a direct influence on the immediate neighborhood, and with respect to closure centrality, which finds out nodes through which the information can spread as quickly as possible across the entire network. The other metrics like betweenness, eigenvector, and so on. So for this also, we have proposed a lot of decoupling based approaches using just the hubs itself or with the neighborhood. We have shown the accuracy results like, yes, the approaches do give us extremely precise results. And in doing so, the efficiency aspect is also taken care of by giving us a saving of more than 80% in some cases. Similar work we have done for the closure centrality as well, with high accuracy and high efficiency aspects handled. And as we know, the component cost is also taken care of these cases. Now, one of the cases that we did over here is, what if we have a data set where we have 6 layers where the nodes in the layers represent the US cities, and they're connected based on the airlines that is servicing them. So the American layer basically means the city is connected if there is a flight serviced by American, Southwest. These are the popular airlines in US. Now, what if we want to find out the next upcoming hub of a minor airline like Allegiant over here as compared to all other competitors? So basic intuition behind the expansion was we need to reduce the cost of expansion. So we need to choose nodes which already have a high centrality value in the layer itself. Plus, we need to minimize the competition against the other competitors. That is, those particular nodes that have a high value in the agent layer should have a low centrality value in the competition uh, layers. So using this, we did our decoupling based approach, we got our efficient results, and we said, okay, a city like Grand Rapids can be a potential hub for Allegiant in the future. Now, this work was done in February 2018 in isolation, what people are doing in the industry itself. The most interesting or the most motivating factor over here was actually on July 6th, 2019, Grand Rapids became the hub for Allegiant. So this basically means this, yes, as we have been saying all around, the decoupling approaches can be used for the real life approaches. We have done some work in substructure discovery as well, where we are basically finding out the K substructures individually from each individual layer. We're aggregating the common instances across all the layers, find in the composition step. Then we do a frequency calculation and find out the frequent K substructure across all the layers. This is an iterative process. This goes on to the layers again, and this K substructures are expanded to K+1 substructure. And this process goes on until we have reached the maximum length of substructure. And such, we get to know the frequent substructures across for MLNs. As Dr. Sharma spoke earlier, we have also proposed an algorithm through which, from the analysis perspectives, we can find out the layers for MLN, which basically means that we have used the enhanced entity relationship diagram for that approach, which is well defined in the database field. So using the recursive binary relationships, what we have said is each of them corresponds to a layer where the entity set correspond to the nodes and the edges are based on relationships. We go ahead and we develop all other layers. The non-recursive relationships will give us the interlayer edges. And finally, the relationship names will give us the intra or the interlayer edge labels. The key attribute will give us the node label. All other attributes we are saving in a separate CSV or a database, which we have used for the additional drill down process. Now the cardinality ratios that we have over here will give us information like what is the average degree information and so on. Now this brings us to the uh, live dashboard that we have built using the COVID dataset that we have in hand. And we have used the multi-layer network in the back end to get some interesting results. So let me back off and let me think about, okay, what are the different questions that are plaguing the research and the policymaker community in general. So in which regions was the lockdown was most effective? Did the geographical proximity play a role in that? Going ahead, there have been election rallies both in the US and in India. So were the regions with an uptake caused by the election rallies with mass gatherings? Going ahead, what has been the effect of the air and the land traffic movement on new cases? In this vaccination period that we are all going to experience the next few months, most probably, how do we choose a county or a district so that that administration of vaccine can have the maximum impact? Going ahead, okay, can we somehow figure out the dense regions which are more prone to virus spread due to the presence of institutions with a large workforce? Most importantly, in this COVID period, we have been introduced with a term known as the super spreader event, which basically means that which regions have got been impacted significantly due to major events like the Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year celebrations. Now, giving these things in mind, what precautions can be taken care of for future events? For example, in India, the upcoming state elections, the festivals coming up, probably which are the regions where the maximum precautions need to be taken? So the data model over here, we have used the multi-layer networks clearly for the reason is yes, the requirement to analyze multiple features and relationships. For example, as we saw, if we want to analyze the geographical proximity or the role of different parameters on US counties, the same US counties can be linked based on number of confirmed cases or geographical proximity or the population density. So we can analyze based on the homogeneous network, or probably there might be a need to analyze different types of entities as well. For example, if we want to find out the dense regions which are more prone to virus spread, we may have to study the institutions which can be linked based on the workforce that are having, which are in turn linked to the US counties based on their headquarters. Now, this kind of analysis can bring out a picture of the high risk zones based on the presence of the institutions with a large workforce. So as a part of our work that we have developed a homogeneous based COVID COVID dashboard based on the community detection algorithm. So what we are basically using this dashboard is for analyzing the impact of different events. Let's take a small example. Now, in the recent past in the US, the Thanksgiving weekend went, which was from November 26th to November 30th. So in order to analyze the impact of this event, we are taking into account two periods. One is a base period, which is the period prior to the event. The number of new cases in this period will form the basis of comparison. So we can take any period prior to this. So let's pick up some period as suppose November 10th to November 19th. The target period becomes something which has happened after the event. Now, as per the different government institutions or WHO and all those things, the infection period is something between 2 to 14 days. So let's probably pick up a period from December 3 to December 12. The number of new cases in this period will be compared against the base period. So what we have assumed over here is that both the periods have the equal period length. So once this is chosen, all this information is sent to the backend. A graph is built where each node is a county and they are linked based on if they have a similar percentage change in the number of new cases. Followed by, we do a community-based detection algorithm and we find out the different regions which are basically signifying the similar impact COVID has had in those regions. And we have classified this event regions based on different severity zones like big dip, down tick, spike, and so on. Once we get these communities, we have performed a visualization and we present on the dashboard the final visualization map. So I will show a small architecture. What we have basically done is once the client side selects the required parameters. It is sent to the backend. Using the updated COVID dataset, the MLN generator module builds the layers. These layers are sent on to the analysis module where the communities are found out. The communities are then sent on to the geo visualizer module, which finds out the final visualizations, which are finally sent out to the client side as the result. Additionally, based on the target period, the period highlight generator module fetches the news articles from the New York Times and gives back the top 10 COVID news articles from the target period. Also, periodically, as a scheduled cron job, a module is fetching the updated official COVID cases and deaths for the world and the UF and storing in the backend, which are also displayed on the client side. Now, this COVID dataset that we have over here is updated periodically every night through a cron job using the ongoing repository that is being built by the New York Times. Now, the interesting thing is that this analysis module also has other features like centrality matrix, subgraphs, and so on. So, and this backend is independent of whatever data we use. So we have plans to extend this backend for other visualizations for data sets like traffic accidents, crimes, weather, storm, and so on. So let's look into another analysis that we have done. So what we did was to find out, okay, can we somehow figure out the effect of lockdown that was there in the US? So lockdown period was from the April 1st to the April 30th. Let's take that as the base period. And let's see on a monthly basis how US has probably gone from bad to worse, and who knows, maybe worst in the future. So on May 1, this was the scenario. Green pastures representing areas where there was a decrease in the number of cases, and red pasture showing that there is an uptick in the number of, or the percentage of new cases. Going ahead, June, there were more red pastures, July, August, September, October, November, and finally December. So yes, the picture doesn't look that well. So now what I will do is I will go ahead and give you a short demo of what we have. So I will go ahead and probably I will do one small thing. Just a moment. Okay. Yeah, so is this visible to all of you? Is the dashboard visible?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I will do one more small thing. What I will do is probably I will okay, so I have shared the link of the dashboard on the chat that we have over here. So probably all of us can play along as we are doing. So yeah, so yeah, so as I said, let's go back to the example that we had done. Okay, if we want to find out the impact of the Thanksgiving weekend itself. So the first thing the user needs to do is find out the interval. Okay, let's fix about, suppose 10-day interval. The base period, as we said, was, let's go ahead and let's choose the period. As I said, the Thanksgiving period was from November 26th to the November 30th. So let's choose a period prior to that, suppose November 10th to November 19th. The target period is something after the Thanksgiving. So let's choose something from December 3 to December 12th. Now, what severity zone are we interested in? So let's begin by visualizing all the severity communities that we have, severe communities. We click on submit and the request goes in the backend, and finally the map is visible over here. So what we can clearly see over here is that the Thanksgiving break had a really negative impact on the Western on the western coast and the eastern coast of the US. Now, if we want to filter out the regions where we saw a more than 100% rise in the new cases, we have the feature of selecting, suppose, the spike. In this case, we can filter out the regions which have had the worst impact. Now, using the zoom in capability and the pan capability, we can go ahead and probably look into the different county information. So what we can see is a county like Los Angeles saw that there was more than 200% rise in the number of new cases following the Thanksgiving break. So this means that probably these are the regions where people were not conforming to the social distancing norms, the masks were not used, and probably there's uh, festival season or this break season did have a negative impact. We are also highlighting a few additional information like the density of population, the median household income, the percentage high school graduates as additional information for some in-depth understanding of these counties. Now, uh, so if we do one more small thing apart from this is, let's suppose I want to analyze, suppose, the 30-day period, the two immediate 30-day period. Suppose I choose the November 1st. So what if I want to now go ahead and choose the regions which probably should be given the vaccine on a priority basis? So which regions are probably having a spike in the recent times? So in this case, I chose a 30-day period, the past December period over here, and we click on submit. Okay. Okay, let me choose it again. So number 1 and December 1, I go for all. I click on submit. Okay, let me clear the cache once. What I will do is, I guess there is some lag on the backend. That's why we're unable to. Yeah, I think now it comes up. Yeah, so there is some lag on the backend. Um, so what we can probably see here is that when we choose the most recent periods again, so probably if we have to administer the vaccine on a priority basis to some counties, so probably we can using this, we can choose the counties probably where there's a lot of rise in the new cases. And yes, the counties can be chosen, the analysis of different impact of different events can be seen from these aspects. This basically will also show us, okay, which regions need to take more precautions for the future also. Apart from this, what we have shown over here, as we saw that the top 10 headlines from that target period, we have listed over here, and the links to go and check the news articles from that period. Also, the updated WHO information has been presented over here. So with this, I will just go ahead and present the summary slides. So apart from this, what the different now the current plans that we are having are that probably cases and deaths are not the only picture that we should look into. So other things that we need to look into are is what is the effect of population? What is the effect of median income? What is the effect of traffic movement across different counties or districts? What is the effect of the average mobility? Now, Google is publishing a few mobility reports on a weekly or monthly basis, finding out which public places have the maximum public gathering, like parks, train stations, workplaces, and so on. Plus, how are people spending? Are people spending on grocery more, or are people spending on entertainment more? And is the relation between the spending patterns, is a relation between the rise in cases with the people roaming around in the public places, or the correlation between the traffic movement across different counties, census data, the density of population, and so on. Now, with these kind of analysis, as we can see, each of them will probably become a layer. And using the decoupling approach, we can do the AND composition or composition, and we can get the final results in an efficient and accurate manner. The problem over here is when some data sets probably are open source and probably reliable. So other data sets like the traffic movement and the expenditure categories from the credit cards maybe proprietary and difficult to procure. So with this, I'd like to conclude, and what we can see here is, yes, MLNs are probably the way forward in order to analyze complex data involving multiple entities and relationships. We are able to see the efficient and lossless computation algorithms with respect to communities, hubs, substructures, so on. And yes, there's a real life applicability of this MLN analysis. So food for thought is, yes, now still there is just scratching the surface of the what we have the ball. So we can do a lot of different work, kind of how do we query in an MLN? How do we do subgraph mining? How do we do weighted kind of computations? And how do we bring in scalability factors? How can we use MapReduce functions in case of multi networks and so on? So thank you all. This was our time. And with this, we can take questions now.
So thank you, Dr. Abhishek and Professor Chakrabarti, for this very informative and insightful tutorial. So we indeed have a question. Uh, the question is, using community in a simple graph means people will know each other or have a connection. Can we use the term community in a MLN, say a bipartite graph? As my understanding for a community in bipartite graph refers to the collection of people having common interest rather than knowing each other. So I believe the attendee has asked about the appropriateness of community in a MLN in a bipartite graph. So uh, Dr. Abhishek, can you please answer that?
See, basically what we are saying is that we are working independent of any data set. So as the questioner asked, that probably community represents that it's a friendship network or friendship community. We're working with edges. So yes, the edges in a thing can either represent common interests, they can represent LN connectivity, they can represent anything. What we are saying basically is we're finding out structures in that general graph, which is strong in nature. Now, this strongness of the community can be semantically explained through whether they have common interests, coupled with whether they are friends on Facebook, coupled with suppose they are being directed by other people, and so on. So different semantics can be brought together. But what we have is the analysis question has to be clearly defined, and then the modeling aspect comes, and then we have to understand the results that we have in hand. Dr. Chandra, do you want to add something onto that?
Yeah, I think the notion of a community doesn't change. whether it is a single graph or a multi-layered network. The definition remains the same. In the sense, it's a closely knit community in terms of edge connections with respect to number of nodes. Now, the difference is that you can have a community based upon just the friend relationship in one graph. You can have another community based upon, connected relationship in LinkedIn. You can have a third community that spans these two as well, like actor, directors. There may be a community among the actor layer, community among the director layer, and a community which consists of both actors and directors that are closely knit, which means that the same directors have directed the same actors a lot more than others. So the notion of a community doesn't change with MLN. It is how we want to compute that correctly is what we are looking at.
So as we have already said in the earlier also that this is a completely application independent. So that I think answers our question over there.
Oh,
One of the
thank you.
okay, maybe I think we can take one more question. I think we are already on accelerated time. One of the questions was like when we are talking about these heterogeneous and homogeneous communities, right? So does this decoupling based approach, have you guys observed that it works better for one kind of community? Because I believe like heterogeneous communities may have more rich information in terms of like other granular information about, like as we say, the like other faceted information rather than just a homogeneous community or a network.
So yeah, basically what you can say is, so the basic question is, are there graph structures or graph types where the decoupling based approach is more efficient or more accurate, as I can put across. So as we have said, if the underlying graphs that they may be, say, in both heterogeneous and homogeneous, they are layers. So if the underlying networks have well-defined community structures, then what we can say over here is, yes, the accuracy will be high. Now, in case of a network which is basically more centrality oriented, like airline network, where you will have nodes where there are a lot of outgoing edges and incoming edges, so communities are not well defined. So in this case, the layer wise partial results will only be weak communities. So in that case, the extended decoupling approach that we'll have will also not probably give us more good results as compared to the other graphs which have more defined communities. Dr. Sharma, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would explain, think of it as colored edges. So assume nodes are whatever it can be. Suppose say you have one colored edge, and you want to find community only with respect to black colored edge. You will get a community. You can also find community with respect to a black colored edges and also red colored edges in the same graph, if there are two different kinds of edges or three different. So homogeneous community essentially corresponds to two color edges, one from each layer. Whereas a heterogeneous community corresponds to three colored edges, two from each layer and one corresponding to the interlayer edges. I think perhaps that is the best way. So because the notion of a community is based upon the relationship or the edges or the color of the edge. So you can include or not include whatever color edge you don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That helped.
Are there any more questions from the attendees or panelists? Okay, so I would like to thank Professor Chakrabarty and Dr. Abhishek again. So this was indeed a very informative tutorial and definitely with rich practical the implications as well. So thank you, both the speakers,
Thank you. Yeah.
on
Thank
behalf
you.
of the Course
Pleasure.
Comment Committee.
Okay.
And I think
Thanks a lot for
yeah.
attending. Hope you enjoyed it. you can play with the demo and give us some feedback.
And I think all our email IDs are online. If
Yes,
anyone of you
definitely.
have questions, you can just drop an email to us.
Sure.
Thank you.
The demo was really great, so that I would like to make mention that COVID and the post-lockdown effects and how optimally the vaccines can be distributed. So these are some facing questions that the world is tackling right now. So the demo was really good to see in real time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Okay.
Sharma and Abhishek. I think it must be late there, but yeah, we really appreciate and we can't thank you more for taking this session. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Bye-bye.